Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Seabass of WNWS. This show presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with its house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. It has 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those can be found in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We also thank our title co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt will host SEC Nation for its opener with Georgia on August the 31st. That will happen from 9 to 11 that morning. This is the SEC's ESPN Game Day style show for the conference. The game itself is at 6:30 that evening. Our guest line, brought to you by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on their sheets for years. They're wonderful. I had no idea how comfortable sheets could be until I got Boll & Branch sheets. They are fair trade certified. That means they've been made under safe conditions by men and women who were treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to Boll & Branch, that is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us now. He, of course, works at WNWS in Jackson. He has been a guest of this podcast, man, I guess since we started this thing, my man.
Since you've been doing them. I mean, I would guess the only person who's been doing it as long as me, Mitch Light.
Do you know we're coming up on 4 years, I think, right at the start of the football season?
Dude, time has become an abstract notion to me, man. The other day I stopped by a building. They said, well, you know, that was 2 weeks ago. I was like, man, that was 2 days ago. It had been 2 weeks. I don't know where it's all going. But the one thing I will say is that I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or what, and my time is getting shorter, but this has been by far, the shortest off season for me that I can remember in regards to getting ready for football. I mean, we're fixing to go to camp. Titans already there. Most teams in the NFL already there. High school already there. Dude, you know, it seems like for me anyway, 10 minutes ago, we were giving up 7 million yards in the Texas Bowl. This is by far the shortest offseason I can remember.
This is my explanation. It used to seem like really after the end of basketball season, the days just dragged. You had the end of basketball, then you had nothing till the start of the season, and all that left was endless time to talk about the year to come. With baseball being such a big deal, that filled the spring, and now with this team going so late into the season, almost into July, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, you spend your time catching your breath from that, at least in my shoes I do, and by the time you come up for air, you look up and it's almost time for fall camp, which, by the way, I think starts August 1st, is I think what they told me. I think that's got a lot to do with it, is that baseball has become the diversion between basketball and football. And I mean, that's putting it mildly. It is much more than a diversion, but I think that's why it goes so much more quickly than it used to.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like you said, that's one heck of a diversion. All the way into, like you said, almost July. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of validity to that. But, man, so you said camp is, what, a week from tomorrow? Oh, man, that is so fantastic, man. Fantastic. You know, the only thing about it is that when you wait and you build this up for so long and you come out and the team stinks, it's just like, I waited 8 months for this crap, you know? Of course, in our gauntlet, straight into it. And, you know, I got a million different feelings about that. But when you got Georgia to kick things off, There not that there's ever really any wasted days, but when you're preparing for Georgia as opposed, to Georgia, culinary school, it's a whole different game, man. And something else for you. With us having this influx of grad transfers, and guys outside of the incoming signing class, that's always cool for me to check out too. What transfers have made their way onto campus and is already getting acclimated and have people talking.
Oh,
We were talking. We talked last week, and there's a guy we may have mentioned him a time or two, but I don't remember mentioning him. That man, he could have a decent impact this year on special teams and in the passing game. And that's Justice Shelton Mosley out of Harvard. I don't know if I even mentioned him last week.
no, we didn't. Of course, we don't know how he fits in just yet because we've not seen him on campus.
Right. Well, one thing I will say, at least so far to this point, in the last year or so, the Ivy League has been pretty good to the Commodores. I hope it keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something you said a minute ago sparked a thought. I know the opening 3 weeks of the season are something that causes some hand wringing, but you talked about past years and kind of getting your hopes extinguished early. I think this year, this team could go 0-3 and it won't happen because I think people understand the schedule. I mean, I say it won't. I don't know how people will react, but it sure beats the alternative of 20 years ago when they used to walk into a season and they'd hype themselves up and then they'd go out and get beat by Middle or by Miami of Ohio the first game. So
the two teams I was thinking about. That's hilarious. Those are
or Western Michigan early in the year. I mean, it does. The schedule is not the way you would draw it up, but at least from that dynamic, it sort of affords you an opportunity to continue to have some optimism, even if the start does not go well.
Yeah, that's a fair point because, I can remember being in the press box when we lost that Miami of Ohio game. By the way, I'm trying to remember, was Ben Roethlisberger the quarterback in that game?
No, it was Mike Bath, who that staff had actually recruited and lost.
Okay, I wasn't sure if Roethlisberger was on that team. I couldn't recall. But I remember being in that press box thinking, this sucks. We're horrible. It was all a ruse, and I have nothing to look forward to. Because I think you brought up a great point. Now if we get beat 58-0 against Georgia or something like that, but you're right. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Nobody is going to be okay with an 0-3 start, but they'll understand the 0-3 start and think, we can still we can still easily go to a bowl game here. Nobody really expected to win these games anyway. Not that that's the attitude we want to have, but you could go 0-3, 1-2, and still feel extremely confident that you're going to get a bowl game. Whereas when we lost the Middle or freaking Miami of Ohio, you knew the season was over already before it got started.
Well, one other thing, it seems like under Derek, they have played their best ball in November, starting from that first year where they were terrible. But remember, they almost beat a pretty decent Tennessee team in the finale, lost by a touchdown. Now, the next year it didn't go as well, but the last 3 years, they end the season with wins over Tennessee, a couple of good games against Ole Miss in between. I think that's one other thing is you can look at them and say, and I think that's a credit to him, they do tend to play their better ball late in the year. Now, bowl games, that's a different thing. They've not looked too good in either of those, but at least it indicates to me some level of buy-in that they have with the staff that extends late in the season where you see some other teams lay down and die at that point.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think it happened a couple different times. I'm trying to remember one time, and I want to say, Chris, was this when they went 4-8, maybe in his second year, and they were 2-8 at the time, and just lost, I want to say, to Texas A&M in Nashville. And I think I have it right. And then finished the last two games with pretty solid efforts against Ole Miss and Tennessee. Does that sound right?
I am looking this up as we speak. I do remember they got shut out by A&M. in
Yeah, that's
Nashville.
terrible.
And I remember it was really cold, and A&M's defense was not particularly good that year. Let's see. That was 2015. They had just beaten Kentucky the week before. That was on the Sneaky Pete play with Caleb Scott. And then they go to Knoxville and get beat 53-28, the last game they've lost to Tennessee.
Okay, so it was after that. Could have been after. It'd been the year after that then. Okay. So that would have been what, 16 and 17? So 16, 17, 18 finished the season off pretty well in November is what you're talking about?
Yeah, in fact, of course, last year finished with 3 wins in 4 games, if you included the Arkansas game. And the Missouri game in between was that the 33-28 loss at Missouri, where they were 15-point underdogs and had a chance until the final minute. And, of course, the week before Arkansas, they go to Kentucky and get beat 14-7 without Vaughn. Of course, the week before that, they lose to Florida by 10, where Keyshawn Vaughn goes out of the game, and you know what happened next. So I look back, and really, they had a string of playing 6 pretty competitive games, 3 of which they won to end last season.
Yeah, and I think that the final 9 are going to be a lot like that. Look, there's a couple of games that are certainly tough. To me, the 2 that stick out for the final 9 are in Columbia, South Carolina, and Gainesville. And I look at the rest of that schedule. I mean, there's other tough games. Missouri's going to be tough. There's no doubt. But after those 3, and I say those 3, I can't sit here and act like Purdue's not a winnable football game. It's definitely a winnable football game. Of course, depends on what happens. I mean, that's the same team that beat Ohio State by 29 points last year. They just beat Ohio State. They beat them by 29, Chris. 29. So, you never know. But after that first 3, after you shake off the rust, I mean, and here's the question. You want to talk about a big game? We've been talking about Purdue, and that's a big game. But you know what I'll be real interested to see? Now, granted, this is not the Northern Illinois that we've seen, back in the day. Sometimes they put some really good teams out there. But I want to see what happens, regardless of what that record is, after the first 3 games of the season, when Northern Illinois comes to town, and say, okay, all right, this is a team we're favored to beat. This is a team that we're supposed to beat. This has been a tough 21 days, tough 3 weeks. How do they respond in that game? Whether they're 1-2 or 0-3, whatever the case may be, I would love to say 3-0, but I don't really believe that. How do they respond with that Northern Illinois game? Do they, kind of sleepwalk through that and make it a dangerous game and have to pull it out in the end to win? That might be a sign of where that team is going forward.
Yeah, that is a good question, but I'm looking, and this according to Phil Steele, who keeps track of the lines, they have done extremely well in that kind of game. You go back to 2015, they're a 2-point underdog to MTSU. They win that one 17-13 in a game that, honestly, I've thought about this. If that game never happens, if they don't come back and win that one at the end, I wonder if his career doesn't go very differently and if he's still here at that point. But that's one. You go to the next year, they are 3-point favorites against Middle, win that one by 23. They are 8-point underdogs at Western. And really, Western wasn't that kind of team. Western was way better than Northern. But they win that one. You go to last year, they thrashed Middle 28-6. I think last year's Middle is, and the year before, all 3 are pretty comparable to what they'll get in Northern Illinois. They beat Western Kentucky, which probably wasn't quite as good as Northern is going to be this year. Won that game 31-17. Last year beat Middle 35-7. Again, I think a team comparable to what is expected. Last year destroyed Nevada 41-10, 10-point favorite. Just history says, for whatever reason, in these kind of games, he very much exceeds expectations. So based on history, and you hear me answer this, like last week I said, based on history, I don't expect them to beat LSU if LSU is as good as the prognosticators think LSU is, because they never win that kind of game. Well, if Northern Illinois is what everybody thinks it is, this is a game that they pretty much win easily every year.
Yeah, I think so. You know, the one thing that I don't want to be when it comes to the Commodores, where they just don't shine. The one thing I definitely do not want to be, and that's a double digit favorite. or like a favorite against an SEC team, you know, at home, stuff like that. When we get those high numbers, we start getting like 12, 17, 18, 20 point favorites. I don't give a flip who we're playing. I get nervous then. When that starts happening, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't think we're going to get the effort that we need. I never like being a huge favorite. Now, having said that, being a huge favorite generally means you're playing pretty well. But I don't think we respond well as big time favorites.
I would question that.
Okay.
How many times do you think they have been a double-digit favorite since Derek has been here? I'll tell you what. I'm gonna throw out 2014 because they were 13-point favorites against Temple and UMass. You know what happened in those two. The UMass game they barely won, and were a 16-point favorite. But since then, how many times do you think they've been a double-digit favorite, and how do you think they've responded?
Okay, so we're not counting the first season.
Yeah, the last 4 seasons. I want you to guess how many times they've been a double-digit favorite and what happened.
And you'll have. I've gone crazy. Now Derek's been to 2 or 3 bowls. I'm trying to remember.
He's been to 2.
Okay, he's been to 2. So he's played 50 games, not counting that first season. So he's played 50 games. Double-digit favorites. On average, because of non-conference, I will say that he has been double-digit favorites in 5 years. I'm going to say between 8 and 10 times.
No, they have. Let's see. Let me count it. I don't even have the number, but I'll go off them as they go. They beat Austin P in 2015. They were a 47-point favorite. They won that 47-7. So they didn't cover. Of course, Austin P was an FCS team at that time and still is. They were not a double-digit favorite against anybody the rest of the year. In fact, they weren't a favorite against anybody the rest of the year except Kentucky, which they won that. They were a field goal favorite. They won by 4. So that year they were an underdog 10 times.
1-1.
Yeah, that year they were an underdog in 10 of the 12 games, but they won 4. Last year, 2016, they were a double-digit favorite once. That was TSU. They were a 27-point favorite. They won that by 18. They were only favored. They were only favored in 2 other games. They were favored against South Carolina, the opener, which they lost, and they were favored against Middle Tennessee by 3, which again they won that one going away. 2017, they're a 3-point favorite against Middle. Again, not even a double-digit favorite. They won that one 28-6. They're a 50-point favorite against Alabama A&M. They won that 42-0. They were an 11-point favorite against Western, and they won that one 31-17. Last year, they were a double-digit favorite twice against Nevada. They won that one 41-10. And against TSU, they won that one 31-27. So the common denominator that I'm seeing here is they have not covered against any of their FCS opponents, but they've won them all. Some have been more interesting than they should have been. And in the other games where they're a double-digit favorite, which have not been that many, they've responded pretty well. So I think you are afraid of imaginary demons. No, I don't think you are, other than FCS games. Yeah.
No, dude, from the what I said, the parameters of what I said, they were 2 and 4 as double-digit favorites as far as covering goes. They were 2 and 4, so that's exactly right. They do not play well with the big favorites.
Okay, I see that as different though. Those games were all games they knew they were going to win. FCS games, teams mail it in. You saw what Alabama and the Citadel did last year. Alabama led that one by 7 at halftime or whoever they played.
Do you have to remind you of the TSU game last year?
No. Look,
won?
Trust me, I know. I'm just saying I look at it a little differently when it's FCS and FBS. I just think for the similar type of game that this is Northern Illinois. This is the team that has gone to bowl games. I think you tend to look at that a little differently. I know coaches say, hey, anybody can beat us, and they try to talk, games up, but kids know the score. They know the difference between FBS and FCS. I just think that those games get approached differently. I don't see that like Alabama A&M or something like that. You can disagree, that's fine. I see it differently.
I guess at the end of the day, what it boils down to is outside of FCS teams, we're rarely ever double-digit favorites anyway.
Yeah, almost never. I mean, the irony is he was double-digit favorites twice his first year. And then since then, against FBS teams, it has been yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just feel better when
11 against Western in 2017 and 10 against Nevada last year. That's been it.
That is just unbelievable, dude.
It really is.
But it's like I just said, I guess I feel better when nobody thinks we're worth a damn, and they don't expect anything out of us. I guess I feel a little bit better. But, we'll see. I mean, I agree. Northern Illinois is certainly a game that they should win, and lately they have been winning those. But that game will be on the heels of Georgia at West Lafayette and at LSU, or at home against LSU.
Yeah, and while we're chatting, I want to see who Northern Illinois opens up against, too, because I guess you never know if that's a factor. If they come in 3-0 or 4-0 or something like that.
I'm trying to remember. They haven't been nearly as good as they used to be. Isn't that right? I
think they went to a bowl. Yeah, they're not what they were 7 or 8 years ago or whenever it was that they were really good. And what did they go to, like the Orange Bowl one year or something crazy like that?
They've been pretty darn good they were pretty good in the not so distant past. I don't know that they're like that now, but remember at one time you didn't want to play in Northern Illinois.
No.
Wear you out. Remember they had guys like was it Michael Turner?
Yeah, who went to the Falcons and was really good. Yeah. And UConn used to be the same way. It's a little different situation. How about UConn, by the way, basically throwing the towel on football?
Man, I mean, I just know how you give up football. I just know how you do it.
They didn't give it up, by the way. I mean, I think they just said, we'll just be in whatever conference will take us, it sounds like.
Well, what I should have said is give up on football, not give it. Yeah. Of course, this is the team that hired Randy Edsall as its head coach, so.
Okay, back to Northern Illinois. Last 5 seasons, 11-3, 8-6, 5-7, 6-5, 8-6. So, and they opened the season against Illinois State. Then at Utah, at Nebraska. So much for confidence coming into Nashville, it would seem.
Yeah,
they do have an off week before that. So,
yeah, that's they got a little nasty little run themselves they got to deal with. Actually, I feel a little better about that, to be honest with you. Okay, good way. Okay, good.
I say we go into the mailbag at this point because there's some good questions that are going to take us a while to answer.
Okay, sure. Sure. I got time. Do your thing.
Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him today, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try and tell him you heard about it here. Also, be sure to reach out to Josh about Camp Horizon and some sponsorship opportunities. Josh does that out of the goodness of his heart. That is a camp for kids who have cancer and certainly a cause worthy of your support. Okay, our friend VUMAT23 brings back buy or sell. We did that maybe a month ago. I thought it was really good.
Oh, good.
This is based on Derek Mason's comments from Media Day, plus some on Radio Row, he says. And he's got 6 things, starting with number 1, this is the deepest team they've ever had, buy or sell.
This is the deepest team that he's ever had. Well, first, I'll start by, before I give my opinion on it, first I'll say, why would he say that if he didn't believe that? No, it's one thing. And I think he's doing a good job. I think a lot of that has to do with the guys returning and the transfers. I mean, I think they add immediate credibility there, and the transfer certainly helped with the depth. But I will say this to you: they are still big question marks in some of the most key positions that you can possibly have on a football field. I mean, he obviously knows his personnel better than I do. But I will say this: in the battles of like quarterback, yes, we don't know who our quarterback is, but you feel pretty decent about both options. But having said that, Chris, how many games has Deuce Wallace started?
None.
None. How many games has Riley Neal started in the Southeastern Conference
None.
with this group? None. So those are real questions that beg to be asked. So, I mean, I feel pretty good about these options, but the truth is neither one of them have done it in this conference yet. So those are question marks on the offensive line. I mean, things could work out well, and not having Devin Cochran in the spring really made it look worse than it probably is. But the fact is, there are still question marks in that offensive line. Who helps rush the quarterback besides Dio? I mean, some unproven secondary, some quarterbacks that we're going to be counting on to step up, and there's no chance one of them is better than Jawan was. Who we building the linebacking core around with Dimitri? These are all real questions, but it sounds like there's potential legit answers at some of these things. It just hasn't. We haven't got to camp yet, so we don't know. I think a lot of the times beforehand, especially now, I think maybe Derek looked at it and said, okay, with these positions, not only do I don't know who's going to do it, I don't have anybody. And I don't have any faith in anybody. He ain't going to come out and say that, but I don't have faith that I've got two good SEC linemen, or I don't have faith that I have anybody who can rush the quarterback on a consistent basis or stop the run in the middle or something like that. So I think maybe this has to do with more of the potential of some of the guys who haven't done it yet to go along with that mixture of transfers and the guys who came back. What do you think?
I am going to buy, I think, kind of with an asterisk or two. The first one is that let's not forget we're comparing the program against itself. And most years they're going to have some depth issues coming in, okay? Offensively, I think that you can say they've got a couple of quarterbacks that they trust, one of whom has started, 32 games in the MAC. Running back, we know the score there. They've got Vaughn. They've got some capable guys behind him. Receiver, tight end, they're deeper at those positions maybe than they've ever been. Offensive line, there's some questions, but I think they have some bodies they say they trust. In defense, I look at the defense, especially at corners and linebackers, of when I go out and watch them, and again, my time in spring was limited, and look, pessimistically, I'll say this, maybe they all stink. I don't think that's the case, but it looks to me like they've got a lot of guys that are interchangeable, like some positions you try to come up with a depth chart. You say this guy's third here, but it might not take a lot for him to start. I think there's at least competitiveness in the positions. And now maybe I confuse that with quality depth, and that may not be the case. But as I sit here with what I know right now, I think it's reasonable to buy. I'm not going to bet my house on it, but I can see why he says it based on what I've seen.
That's fair. And by the way, I don't think I actually answered the question. I'm pretty optimistic about this team. Deepest team he's had. Is there anything between buy and sell? Is there another option for me? I will go with sell, just because I'm a little nervous about some of these positions. I'm excited, but I'm nervous about the proven depth here. So while I do like this team, I'm going to say sell on that part.
Okay. I mean, I guess there's a push option if you wanted to, but although we were not given the choice, that's kind of a cop-out. I will say one more thing. I reserve the right to change my mind. Again, part of the issue is just I don't have enough sample size in watching them to make a judgment that I'm as confident about as I did last year, just because I got to see so much more of them. But from what I know, I can reasonably buy it. I may go to practice and change my mind, but sitting here before fall camp, having seen any of it and not having seen enough of spring, I can see why he might say that. Okay, question number two. Mason saying this is the best team he's had.
I mean, kind of just what I got through talking about. I mean, look, if he really believes that, I mean, he's cut his pulse on this program a heck of a lot closer than I'll ever have it. And if he truly believes that, that's awesome. I mean, then we're in a good position regardless who we're playing. I mean, I mean, if we take the highlights, Chris, we say the best back we've ever had, best tight end we've ever had, second leading returning receiver in the SEC who's going to play in the NFL, a couple more guys who are going to play on Sundays. Those are all great things, and maybe it is the best team on paper that he's had. But the things that I highlighted a minute ago as to why I might be a seller there are certainly applicable for this question as well. I mean, Chris, let me ask you this, Chris. Do you think this is the best team he's had on paper going into the season?
I think I buy it. Again, I would not bet the house on it. There are some deficiencies that I'm concerned about that if you've listened to the podcast, you know what they are. But I think their upside at certain spots with certain players. Again, this is very rare for Vanderbilt, not just since Mason's been here, but for anybody, maybe since World War II. I mean, you just don't – at Vanderbilt, you do not usually have an All-American tight end and an All-American running back and a receiver who's going to end up pretty prominently among SEC's career charts, not to mention the guys behind him. I just think this is – again, I could see their deficiencies sinking them, but if you want to go on upside, I think there's an argument for sure.
I mean, I think for me, they just have to stop the run, Chris. That to me, that's I know got some young corners, but they have to stop the run because if they can't, I also envision that All-American running back and all everything tight end and receivers we're talking about, they're gonna be sitting on the sidelines, while teams put together 7-minute drives, that end up in and they're doing that just because they can. And keeping that offense off the field. So, I mean, to me, you want to talk about pass protection, and it's certainly important. To me, the most important thing for this team, I know you got to find your quarterback, but they have just got to stop the run this year. That performance against Baylor, I know Baylor's got a good offense, and it's a bowl game. I get it. But, yeah, man, it was so bad schematically and so bad execution-wise by the personnel. I mean, if it's even anything – remotely like that this season, we're for a very long year. I don't care who we have at running back, receiver, and tight end.
Okay.
Had all those guys last year.
Which leads me to number 3, buy or sell. The defense will look like it did in 2016.
I'm cautiously optimistic about buying because I think some of these cats that are coming in, here's a question that could help. Not that I'm putting that type of pressure on them, but like in the case of Malik, do we know anything? Is he going to be able to play? I saw a report the other day that said that it looked hopeful that he might. He's got experience, though it was limited at Florida. Is he going to be ready to play? Is he going to be eligible to play? Some of these JUCO transfers, Paulino Ball, obviously Carrier Williams, and Cam Watkins. These guys right here could have impacts. There's no question about that. But I'm looking for a couple of guys that we don't know if they're going to be able to play or not. What about Langham? Is he going to be able to play this year? Do you know?
I don't know. My guess is he's not. I don't think that changes the answer. To me, I think I hate to say it's laughable, but to me, this was not even a decision. No, that I don't see. Okay, 2016. They gave up 408 yards per game, 5.9 per snap, 24 points per game. Last year, they gave up 26.6 points a game and 439 total yards, 6.1 per play. I think our debate all along has been they'll be, my stance is I think they'll struggle to be as good as they were last year. When they weren't good at all. I use that relatively. So I don't think that they'll be better than they were last year. I might be wrong. I might be wrong about that. I could be, but I sure don't see them being what they were in 2016. To me, that is maybe the easiest one on the board to me. I say no.
Well, I think what he's counting on and hoping, because I remember saying something about mentioning Davion Davis making plays and being an integral part of that. He's going to have to be a stud, Chris. He's going to have to be a super stud, a rock that can't be moved. Rutgers going to have to live up to some of that hype this year. He's got a year in the system now. He's going to have to prove something. Cameron and Drew are going to have to play much better than they did last year. I think it's a lot to ask. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, if you can get a Malik Lang, no, I'm not saying he makes the difference one way or the other. But from a depth standpoint, it certainly can't help because we just didn't have anything last year. And I'll say this, even though he is a true freshman, we did not have anybody like Davion Davis last year. Nobody. Now, if he can come in there, and he can get in that rotation, and by a couple of games into it, maybe he's even starting in that thing, that, him coming in spring really helped out. That could help out. We just need a couple of cats to plug the middle for a little bit and give everybody else a chance to adapt. If Davis can be that guy, man, a couple others here, then, Brandon Powell somehow, not Brandon Powell, what's his name? What's the JUCO?
Brandon Maddox.
Brandon Maddox, yeah. Some of these guys come in and have a nice impact, make a little bit of a difference. I think we got a shot to be better. Look, I don't think they're going to be good, but I think to be better. And then once we start getting things going in a year or so, now you want to ask me this question next year when I know Malik's playing, when I know Davion Davis is there, when I know that Derek Green is there, when I know that the young cat out of IMG who's committed, if he stays committed and signs with Vanderbilt, those guys are in there. Man, I think that position changes night and day, but this year, I'm not quite sure that's the case.
Well, I don't see it like you do. I don't think it's a matter of just if their defensive line can get better, that makes everything better. I think it'll make things better, and I think that their defensive line is going to be better. The kids that they are getting and bringing in look more like SEC defensive linemen than they have, but it usually takes a couple years, and I think they're in that transition year to getting there. So while I think the line will be better, my concern is the secondary, because I'm not saying none of these guys can play. You don't know. We may be talking in November, and Cam Watkins and Dante Carey-Williams were good. Who knows? But Juwan Williams was far and away their best defensive back last year. Nobody else was close to an impact guy week in and week out besides him. I just think right now they got a lot of guys. I don't know who emerges. I think they got issues in the secondary, which, of course, their defensive line getting better could help that. Those guys don't have to cover as much, but that's where I'm really concerned. I don't see a difference maker back there. No, they may have some, but we just haven't seen it yet.
Well, I'm not calling him a difference maker, but didn't Coppett have 3 picks last year in limited time?
Yeah, but his grades were just okay. He did make some big plays, and look, they had some guys. Haney did it too. I'm not saying they didn't have some guys that flashed, but I just have not seen a guy, and maybe Dante Carey-Williams was that guy, which didn't get to see it in the spring. I just didn't see a guy that I walk out there and go, okay, this guy can lock down other teams' receivers. Even Juwan Williams could do that as well as anybody could, and even Juwan got burned at times, and Juwan was, 3 sets of head and shoulders above everybody else on the roster. So I don't know how you look at that and you aren't concerned.
Well, I'm concerned, but understand that, and even though we may sometimes defensively, we made it look very easy for opposing passing games, the easiest thing in the world to do. It's much more difficult to complete a pass than it is to run a 234 lead. Just running the A and B gap, front off tackle all day long when nobody's there. because they're 8 yards in the backfield, or 8 yards pushed back into linebackers when they can get to the second level without being contacted. When that is the case, yes, I get it. The secondary has the issues, but the premier issue here is the inability to stop the run. It's not a conversation. It is absolutely the thing that trumps everything else. No question about it.
Okay, here's the other thing, and I think this is why I don't take him as seriously. How many times has he vastly overestimated his defense? He seems like he does that a lot.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's a head scratcher for me because not only have they been bad, they've been like, good Lord, bad. You know what I mean? Look, let me tell you something. I've seen, and it's not like he's recruited just awfully on defense. I mean, a lot of these cats that he brought in over the last couple of years are pretty well thought of. But, you know, even when Vanderbilt wasn't any good, even when they were losing to some games they shouldn't have lost, I mean, the defense had better efforts than what we've seen in the last year or two. I mean, last year, and some of these defensive efforts were just sickening to watch. They were just terrible. And they get pushed around by any and everybody that stood in their way. And that's really the least acceptable thing to me. You know, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I remember the Woody days when the offense was god awful and hard to watch, and I don't ever want to go back to that. But man, and look, defense is not all attitude, not these days. I mean, the defenses today, this isn't the 70s and 80s. Defenses today, offenses have figured out you have to spread defenses out as thin as you possibly can, get them vertical, get them every level, test them, run sideline to sideline. It's a little bit different. So it's harder to do that. But just the way that almost to a man they seem to be manhandled by whoever they're playing, that is disappointing. And surprising for a guy who schematically was able to shut down people like Oregon when he was at Stanford.
Okay, number 4, buy or sell. The other coaches think I'm too cocky.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely the case. How could that be anything but by, Chris? Remember the dance and sliding all the sidelines? We're going bowling, all this other stuff. Yeah, and you know, I don't care though. I don't care how other coaches feel about that. Good, I'm glad he's cocky. You know, strut around the yard. What's that statement he always uses, Chris? I mean, he says it all the time. Can't talk about it, can't be about it. I'm all right with that, just as long as you don't talk it, then go get drilled by 25 because you can't stop anybody on defense.
Yeah, I think you and I see that one eye to eye, and to me that also is a who cares. But okay, number 5, the defensive line is better than it's ever been.
Than it's ever been?
I guess he means since he's been there. I'll tell you, it's sure not the best that it's ever been at Vanderbilt, but figuring that he means it's the best that he's had, I guess that's how we will evaluate the statement.
Okay, well, you know, to this point, I mean, look, Dio is a really good football player. He's a really good football player, and I think Davis is going to be as well. You know, the other guys, they're all right. You know, I truly believe that the defensive line will be in a year to 2 years, and it maybe just be 1 year, but definitely in 2 will be the most improved unit on this team, and it won't even be close. But I don't know that they're there yet. Personnel-wise, that's about to blossom. Recruiting's going well. The transfers are going well, but that is not here yet. The present right now, there's no way I can say that, and hopefully that's the case, but I mean, do you believe that?
I can buy it, but that's another of those with an asterisk because I just don't think any of his defensive line since he's been here have been very good. So it's kind of like, okay, it may be the best, but it's the best compared to what?
Yeah, and that's fair. You know, like I've been, you know, I've had a horse in the Kentucky Derby every year for the last 5 years, and this horse just finished the best of any of my horses I've ever had. Well, he finished 15th. Yeah. Do I have a good horse here? No, not really. You know, I mean, all things being relative, it may be personnel-wise our best unit. That doesn't make it good.
Okay, the next one, Josiah Seo made a move in spring ball, is going to play a big role this season.
Boy, wouldn't that be great? I mean, he's a tree trunk, isn't he? I mean, I would love for that to be the case, but you're going to file that under the one. I'll have to see it first.
That's another one of those I don't know how to evaluate. I have never been to a practice, and I've seen him for years. He's a great kid. I wish him well, but I've never just thought, man, this kid is just flashing and waiting to break out. Now, maybe he did that in spring, but I didn't notice it when I saw practice. And that's one of those things that almost causes me more concern than it does anything, because I'm like, okay, well, if he is going to play a big role, that means he's going to play in front of other people. And I just think he's further down the pecking order than probably the rest of the scholarship guys. So I don't know if that's true, that should make people feel better. Maybe it does. Maybe he really has had a transcendent off season as a different guy than what I have seen. But again, my point of reference is what I've seen before and what I perceive a talent level with him and the rest of the guys. And that doesn't, I don't know that makes me feel better about the state of the line, but that's one that I'll have to evaluate and see.
Yeah, and sometimes, man, I mean, look, sometimes the light just comes on. I've had teammates who, in the off season, in the spring, or they figure some things out. They get stronger, get a little bit more dedicated, and they're clearly a better player than they were. For him to make a meaningful difference in this rotation, to crack it and make it a meaningful difference, he'll have had to make a big jump. But maybe he has. Maybe he can. Look, I'm not going to down that dude. I mean, if he's put the work in, let's see what you got. I mean, goodness knows we ain't turning anybody away right now. Not yet.
Let's see. Let's move on to Dusty Orleans. He says, who scores the first touchdown of the year for the Doors, and which defensive player is most likely to make a score?
Who scores the first touchdown for the Doors? Well, here you go, Chris. They're going to score a touchdown on the second offensive possession of the season, okay? They're going to go 3 and out, and we're going to be like, oh, boy, here we go. But you know what? They're going to score on their second possession, and they're going to do it from the 8-yard line, and it's going to be a little play action to 5, and it's going to be on 1st and goal from the 8. They're going to bite down. They're going to be running right. It looks like they think they're going right off left tackle Devin Cochran, and they're going to bite down, man, and they're going to release. They're going to release Jalen Pinkney on a Y hot. That's good, Jalen. Good grief. Jared Pinkney on a Y hot into the end zone. Line him inside. They're playing from the Y, and he's going to get there on a hot and score the first touchdown. Extra point will be good. Georgia missed their first. They scored on their first drive and missed the extra point because it got tipped at the line of scrimmage. And with 4 minutes left to go in the first quarter, Vanderbilt leads 7-6. How about that?
I don't think I can match your level of detail on that one.
Yeah, I bet you could if you wanted to.
Well,
I'm gonna go with Pink.
I got my own version. I'm looking at last year. Vaughn scored 12 touchdowns, Lipscomb 9, Pinkney 7. I'm just going to go with history and say it's Vaughn who gets the first one.
Okay. I mean, you know who my first instinct was. The first person that I was going to say. I was going to say C.J. Bowler, but I changed it and went with Pinkney. I think we're going to throw it in from the 8-yard line. The question is, who's going to be throwing that pass? I don't know. I'm going to say Pinkney. That's my final answer.
Bowler had 2 touchdowns, by the way, last year.
What? Who did?
Bowler had 2 touchdowns and 34 catches. If you're wondering.
And that was as a true freshman. You're going to see some things out of C.J. Bowler. I believe that. He can develop it to a very nice 2 this year. Sort of in the Chris Boyd role, if you will. I'm going to say defensively, I'm going to give it to a cat that I mentioned a minute ago. Now, I'm trying to remember, Chris. Now, when I heard the question you asked, I was trying to think of who was the last Commodore to have a pick 6, from the secondary. I remember there was like a pass, like, whenever like one batted up in the air or something like that, and Dio got it, I think. or something like that. Maybe it was Daria. I don't remember, but I can't remember the last time, and maybe I'm just not remembering right, when a member of the secondary picked off a pass and took it to the easy. But I'm going to pick a name that I said a minute ago, graded out all right, but man, one of our safeties, Frank Coppett from St. Thomas Aquinas, going to get his first interception of the year. It will come in the Purdue game, and he'll take it to the house. 14 yards.
I think defensive touchdowns, Odingbo got one, Dio did in the opener against Middle, like a 2-yard fumble return.
Something like that, yeah.
I
That's the
think
one.
Sims got one against Kentucky on the road his first or second year, whichever that one was. And I think Orrin Burks got one at one point when he was still a defensive back. Gosh, I remember one other safety, I think, scoring one in there too somewhere. Maybe I'm thinking of the Burks one, but defensive touchdowns are kind of flukes.
Yeah.
Like a time it's a tipped ball that a safety gets. Coppett would be a good guess. That's probably the first one I would guess. I'm thinking of maybe an outside linebacker scoops up a fumble. This is totally random guessing here. I'm gonna go Kenny Abear. Maybe a strip sack. Maybe a strip sack in the end zone.
Okay, I like Kenny. He's a hustler, man. I like him. That'd be fine with me. But I was sitting there thinking about, so, we're talking about multiple years since a member of the secondary has a pick six then, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, all right, but you're right. I mean, look, those aren't overly common occurrences from game to game for a defensive unit, so I'm not mad at them about it. But if we have one of those, and I want it to come from that, and I think that it's going to be Mr. Coppett.
Okay, Vandygal78 says, I know SEC media days are just a bunch of guys talking big, but what were your thoughts? She says, how do you think Mason and the players did? Mason sure got credit for showing up a day early and hitting Radio Row. Any surprises from any other teams in the East?
Now, Chris, let me say this. As far as the players go, I saw Keyshawn. I didn't get to see the others. And then, of course, with Coach, Coach kills media day. He does. He's fantastic at it, man. And he's a fantastic speaker. And every time you hear him talk at media days, you think, man, y'all better look out now. And look, he's done fine. I think that Coach has been an adequate coach. I think he's good at stirring up the hype and getting the attention to Vanderbilt. But I think it's one of those in the moment type of deals. I think when it's over with, we go back to talking about everybody but Vanderbilt at the end of the day. But when he's at that podium, I mean, I'll say this to you. Yes, I have the rooting interest, but if I was completely neutral, he's the guy that I would want to listen to more than anybody. I think he does a fantastic job of selling himself in the program.
Let's see. KT Doors says, after seeing the new locker room renovations for LSU, you still think Vandy can beat them this year? Well, I guess you saw that video. That was pretty.
I did.
That was something.
I did. It was what was that, Chris? $28 million? Is that what that was?
I don't know, but they look nice.
Look, yeah, it's fine, but does it change anything? Unless that locker room can get up and play a football game, no. They're the same team regardless of what they're this year. Now, if you want to talk about it being able to attract kids going forward and stuff like that, then maybe they lose a battle too, recruiting-wise. The kid falls in love with the locker room and all those other amenities. Yeah, but as far as this year, that locker room has zero to do with the outcome of that game.
Last question.
I mean, now, wait a minute. Don't you think? I mean, what does that locker room is not going to change anything?
Oh, I mean, I think the question was in jest. I mean, obviously there was the reference to what teams put into their programs and everything. And I mean, yes, LSU's got much better support than they do, but I just thought that was it is what it is.
And now look, what it does do more to me is like, golly, Bill. What it does do, Vandygal 78, is it makes me think, not that I didn't already know, but is this really what we're up against? And then becomes the question, are we up against LSU? No, not really. I want to live in a look. I want to live in a world where we're competing with Georgia and Florida for Eastern titles, but that's probably not reality, at least right now. Now, you've talked about the possibility of some major, possibly a new stadium within 5 years. You had to guess, and that there's some financial campaigns that are going to help out a lot tremendously for Vanderbilt athletics. But at the end of the day, that's still going to have them at the bottom of the SEC in that particular category, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but that's not the point to me. The point is
How
there's
can that not be the point?
well, here this is why. I think you can still be last, but you can close the gap significantly and just make them respectable. Like their facilities compared to most of the SEC, you know, just are not respectable. And we've talked about this in basketball where they had deficiencies in the locker room, like rotting wood and stuff like that. The stadium is just ugly. To be honest with you, for the most part, the weight room is small compared to most people's. I think what you can do is no, I don't think that they need to get into this arm race where they're spending dollar for dollar what Alabama and LSU do, but I think they need to get more in the ballpark. If Duke and Wake can do something respectable, then shoot for something like that. And that's when, if you get more in the ballpark or you're winning games and your facilities look a whole lot nicer, and what you do, even if it's not as big, is really well done and really in a creative way that attracts the kinds of kids that you're trying to recruit, that's where you start saying, okay, if we're in the ballpark with this kid because our facilities raise us to the point to where he's not coming on campus and laughing at what we have compared to everybody else, then I think that's where the academics and the other things start to maybe sell kids. You just don't want to be so far behind that a kid looks at you and says, my high school's got a better weight room. And I think in some cases that's where they've been. I think if you're Vanderbilt, we just want to get to the point where you're respectable. You don't try to go dollar for dollar with those schools, but you close the gap. And that's when, instead of an eyesore or something that detracts from what you're trying to sell, it takes away some of the objections and it makes you more competitive, where in that case, some of the things that you have as advantage, I think, come into play more, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. There's no doubt. But and this raises a more interesting question to me right here. Okay, let's say new stadium. Let's say that some of the things that we've been hoping for financially, as far as investment into this athletic department, this football program and whatnot, starts to come to fruition. All right, it happens. Let's say all this within 5 years is a reality. Everything's relative. So what does that mean for us? That we now, what's the jump? I mean, look, again, yes, we're not battling Florida and Georgia for facilities. I get that, but we make the necessary adjustments, like you're talking about, the necessary investment, like Duke and some other teams like that. Okay, 5 years, we've done that. What does that mean? Who are we now? Other than it doesn't look like a joke when you come to our stadium. Results-wise, what are we talking about? Does this propel them to the potential where this is an 8-4, 9-3 team year in and year out? What type of significant, tangible record improvements could we start seeing as a result of those things?
Oh, I don't think there's any reason it couldn't get them to that 7 and 8 win level. No, not every year. Now, if you're Vanderbilt, you're never going to be Alabama or LSU. You're always going to have one of those years where you lose a bunch of seniors the year before, and maybe you're going to have a 3-win season the next year. But I think you can get to 7 and 8, maybe 9 wins if everything goes right. I mean, look, they're kind of close where they are. I mean, they won 3 conference games last season. They did that a couple years before. They're not far off, and Derek has had nothing to sell. So I mean, if you're winning 6 with nothing to sell, I don't think winning 7 or 8 is a big jump.
Okay, so here's the question then: and I may be wrong about this. Are we aspiring to be South Carolina? Is that where we're aspiring to be?
Maybe. I think you don't really look at it that way. I think you just do the best you can realistically and just say, let's let the results follow. I don't think you say, we're going to set up to be South Carolina or what Ole Miss was for a long time. I just think you say, We think it's reasonable to spend this. This will make us more competitive. We'll hope to get and retain good coaches and to sell the other elements of our mission to the right kids and let the chips fall where they may. Maybe you have that one year like Wake Forest had that year, went to the Orange Bowl. You just never know, but I think that it limits your downside. And the other thing that people don't talk about enough with the NCAA and the APR stuff, you can't get away with some of the academic shenanigans that you used to be able to get away with. I think that's one reason. That and the fact that they're on TV every week. I think the SEC Network has helped raise their boat a good bit. Now, I know that's just made the rest of the league tougher, but let's go back to the first part of the show where we talked about how they've played against the Northern Illinois of the world and how it's night and day compared to what it used to be. I don't think that's coincidence. And I think that I can see where they are now. They're respectable. Are they where they need to be? No, of course not. But I think if you start fixing some black eyes, which, by the way, I won't get into detail about what I heard a week ago, but heard something that indicated to me that everything I've said in terms of optimism for facilities and stadiums is dead on, and maybe sooner than we thought. I just leave it at that. I just don't know why you fix those areas. Look, this is a historic time for them. Look at how much stuff has changed in 10 or 11 months. They've been able to be reasonably competitive in football at points, which historically for them has been hard to do the last 50 years, despite an embarrassing lack of effort. I just think that objectively you look at it and say, okay, they've started to close the gap some. Just fixing the black eyes will help. And look at baseball. I just think that's the thing that I continually point to. People could say Vanderbilt can never win at this and never win at that. I look at that and point at that and say, how do you know? Because let's face it, if Walker Buehler doesn't get hurt in 2015, they probably won 3 of the last 6 national titles. For, again, a program that was worse in baseball maybe than it was in football. I just think that we are very swift to put barriers around limits on what you can and can't do. I don't think you know till you give it your best shot. They just haven't given their best shot.
Right, and I agree with that. Just the thing, Neil, one thing that I always tell ball fans when they call my show, because they like to tell you about the 4-star commitment they got, which is great. And that's what I tell them. Look, I said, you got to have these guys. You want that. That's great. I said, but you are so far behind the people that you're trying to be. You're so far behind that even if you continue to get those guys, and by the way, you're still behind them in this particular cycle for recruiting. They're smashing you in this one, and they were already light years ahead of you. So the fact that you're improving your team is great. But as I said, everything's relative. What does that have to do when you're lining up against Alabama, and they were already a million miles out in front of you? Yes, you've made yourself more attractive, but you're still where you were.
Yeah, but I see that as a different issue. I don't think Tennessee should expect to have trouble attracting talent. I just think that there's been a bad culture over there and terrible leadership for 10 or 12 years now. You look at basketball, they're winning. It's because Rick Barnes is a good leader. He's respected. He's well-liked. He knows what he's doing. I think that you've run a parade of football coaches through there, starting with Derek Dooley. I think Butch Jones was pretty good for a while, and I think the lunatic fringe culture over there really fed off the worst parts of his personality and brought them down. I don't know. You had Lane Kiffin, who I've always felt was more of a sideshow than a football coach, who I think set in motion maybe some issues for them. And we don't really know about Pruitt or not. I don't know whether he'll be the guy or not, but I don't think that's Tennessee can't compete on talent. I just think that they have been such a cluster behind the scenes with their leadership from the top, from the university, and from their athletic department. I don't think I don't really see that as the issue. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think.
My point is there are certain places where you can put your best foot forward, and it's still not going to get you where you need to go. And I think that if we max ourselves out, first of all, it can't be a one-time thing. You know what I mean? It can't be just, okay, we're doing this, and this is it. Don't ask us for nothing else. That cannot be the attitude. It just can't. Not in this conference. Maybe somewhere else. That's fine, and you can ride it out. Duke will be fine forever, basically, what they're doing. Us, that we'll find ourselves right back find ourselves right back in the same situation. We have to address it, fix it, and do continued maintenance on it all the time financially. And I'm not talking about repairs. I'm talking about add-ons, additions, because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, but I mean, a big fix probably buys you at least a decade, and I think that's where the leadership has got to be diligent in remembering that point in history and saying, "Hey, look, this is what happened when we threw in the towel for a while, and let's not forget history." I just think that's where they're going to have some leadership from the board in that regard, and saying, "What's the point once they built new stuff and the shine is worn off?" They're going to have to say, "Okay, we're going to need to remember how we went off the path in the past and just commit to not doing that again,"
Right.
which historically has been a challenge over there. But who knows if this has changed things for good or not?
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement. I just want it to be, look, what I don't want us to have to say, okay, hey, we did what you asked. We're 6-6. We're 7-5. Not a whole lot's changed. And we weren't spending a dime. We were going to a ball game, winning 6 games. Now we dropped all this money in the bucket. We might be a game better. Is it really worth all that? Now, and I don't want that to sink in. And I don't think Malcolm has that mindset, but I think there's plenty of them over there that still do.
Yeah, but I would point out the other way that there's also been 1-11s and 2-10s in there too at times over the years. I think there's an argument from the floor end of it too.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say about that is not Derek Mason. For whatever someone thinks he is not, that is not him. This team would have to utterly collapse in every conceivable way to be a 3-win football team.
Well, my friend, we have been on over an hour. I know you probably need to go. I need to go. So on your way out, tell people where to listen to your show and where to find you on Twitter.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at CheapSeatsBass. You can listen to me online at WNWS.com. And if you happen to find yourself in good old Jackson, Tennessee from 6 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, you can find me on 101.5 at the Cheap Seats. And since we're about to start football, also doing play-by-play for the USJ Bruins.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome, friend.
All right, he is Seabass. I am Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with more of these to come later in the week.